The IV line was still taped to the back of my hand when my husband told me he wasn't coming to pick me up. I had been in the hospital for 6 days. 6 days of a ruptured appendix, emergency surgery, a fever that spiked to 104 on the third night, and a drainage tube in my side that the nurses said was the most unpleasant part of recovery, and they were not wrong. My husband, Ryan, knew all of this. He had been there on day 1, sitting in the waiting room while they wheeled me into the OR. He had kissed my forehead before I went under. He had said, "I'll be right here." By day 2, he had gone back to work. By day 4, his visits had dropped to 20 minutes in the evening, just long enough to drop off a smoothie and scroll his phone while I slept. On day 6, when the doctor finally cleared me to go home, I called him from my hospital bed with the kind of relief that only a sick person understands, the relief of finally being allowed to leave. I told him I was being discharged at noon. I told him to bring the gray sweater from the second drawer because the one I had worn in was ruined. I told him I loved him. He said, "Yeah, okay." He did not show up at noon. I called again at 12:15. He picked up on the 4th ring. "Hey," he said, and there was noise behind him. Music, voices. The ambient sound of somewhere that was not our apartment and not the hospital parking garage. "So I'm actually still in Austin." I thought I had heard him wrong. "What?" "Austin, Texas." He said it slowly, the way you explain something to a child. "The guy's trip. I told you about it." He had mentioned it 3 weeks earlier when I was healthy and the trip felt abstract. I had said, "Sure, fine, go." That was before the ruptured appendix. That was before the surgery. That was before 6 days of a hospital bed and a drainage tube and a fever that made me hallucinate my college roommate sitting in the corner of the room. "Ryan," I said carefully, "I am being discharged today. I had surgery. I need someone to drive me home." I know, he said. "But the flight's tomorrow morning, babe. I'd have to eat the ticket and the hotel. It's like $800. $800. I had paid for Ryan's MBA. Not all of it. Some of it came from loans with my name on them, which I had been quietly paying down for 2 years since he graduated and decided he preferred consulting to actual employment. The consulting had produced, in 2 years, exactly 1 client, 1 invoice, and $11,000, all of which went toward a watch he said was a networking investment. "Take a rideshare," he said. "It's like 15 minutes. You'll be fine." I sat with the phone against my ear and looked at the IV tape on my hand and the thin blue hospital bracelet with my name on it, and I thought, he is serious. He is genuinely, completely serious. "Okay," I said. "Great, I'll be back tomorrow night. Love you." He hung up. I sat there for a moment. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and the wilting flowers my coworker had sent on day 2. The television was on mute, showing a weather map of a state I didn't live in. A nurse knocked and came in to begin my discharge paperwork. And she looked at my face and said, "Is everything all right, honey?" And I said yes, because I did not yet know what I was going to do, and I did not want to cry in front of her. I waited until she left. Then I called my dad. My father is a quiet man. He is the kind of man who speaks slowly and carries a very large amount of weight behind every word, so that when he says something, people listen. He was a federal prosecutor for 22 years. He retired 4 years ago to run a small firm with 2 partners, mostly white-collar defense now, though he says the skills transfer. He has never raised his voice at me in my life. He has also never, not once, failed to show up when I needed him. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, sweetheart. How are you feeling, Dad?" I said. "Ryan is in Austin. He's not coming to get me." There was a pause. Not a long one. 2 seconds, maybe 3. The length of time it takes a man like my father to absorb a piece of information and make a decision about it. "I'll be there in 40 minutes, he said. "Don't sign anything with the hospital yet. I'm bringing Daniel." Daniel is my father's associate. He is 29 years old, looks like an accountant, and is, according to my father, the most methodical financial mind he has encountered in 30 years of legal practice. I said, "Dad, I just need a ride home." "You'll get a ride home," he said, "and some other things." 40 minutes. He was there in 38. He walked into my hospital room in his coat with Daniel behind him carrying a leather portfolio, and my father took one look at me. The IV bruise, the drainage site, the gray tinge that 6 days in a hospital gives a person's face, and he hugged me for a long time without saying anything. Then he stepped back and looked at me very seriously and said, "Tell me everything, from the beginning." So I did. I told him about the surgery, which he already mostly knew. I told him about the visits that got shorter, the smoothies that felt more like receipts than gestures. I told him about the Austin trip, about the guys from Ryan's MBA program, about the ticket and the hotel and the $800. I told him what Ryan had said about the rideshare. I told him about the watch. Then I told him of the other things, the things I had not told anyone yet, including my closest friend, because I had been telling myself for 2 years that they were not what they looked like. I told him about the joint savings account that I had stopped being able to log into 6 months ago. Ryan had said there was a banking issue, and he was handling it. I had not pushed because pushing required energy I did not have, and Ryan had a way of making financial conversations feel like personal attacks. I told him about the credit card statement I had accidentally seen in February, the one with 3 charges to a jewelry store I had never been to, and a hotel in Charlotte from a weekend Ryan had said he spent at a friend's place in New Jersey. I told him about the life insurance policy Ryan had asked me to increase last fall, which I had done without thinking much about it because that is the kind of thing married people do. My father listened to all of it without interrupting. Daniel took notes. When I was done, my father was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at Daniel and something passed between them that I did not entirely understand. "We're going to need to look at a few things," my father said very calmly. "Before we take you home." He looked at me. "Do I have your permission?" "To do what?" "To protect you." I looked at him, at the hospital bracelet on my wrist, at the discharge papers on the rolling table beside my bed. "Yes," I said. What happened in the next 72 hours I learned about mostly in pieces. Some as it happened, some later, some weeks afterward when my father or Daniel would mention it in that matter-of-fact way they had, as if what they had uncovered was simply a set of facts to be documented rather than a systematic unraveling of everything I thought my marriage was. Daniel spent the first afternoon going through financial records. My father had a contact at the bank, not an improper one, a legitimate inquiry through the right channels, and what Daniel found was this: the joint savings account, which had held a little over $60,000 at our wedding, held $412 on the day I was discharged from the hospital. The money had not vanished all at once. It had been moved in transfers over 19 months in amounts small enough to avoid automatic flags, $900 here, $1,400 there. Once a transfer of $4,000 that coincided, Daniel noted without expression, with the date of Ryan's MBA reunion trip to Miami, which I had paid for because Ryan said his bonus was delayed. The money had gone to an account in Ryan's name only. From that account, a portion had gone somewhere else. Daniel was still working on that part. The jewelry store charges were a necklace, a bracelet, and a pair of earrings, none of which I owned. The hotel in Charlotte was a 2-night stay under Ryan's name, a double room. The life insurance increase. My father's voice was careful here, and I remembered the way he paused before he said it. The life insurance increase had been requested with a minor but significant change to the beneficiary designation. Ryan's mother had been added as co-beneficiary. My father said he was not drawing conclusions. He was noting facts. I nodded. We both understood what the facts suggested. My father called his attorney from the hospital parking lot, not a family law attorney. He had one of those on speed dial too, but his own attorney, a man named Paul who handled the kind of situations where the word fraud appeared in more than one context. He made a second call to someone at the district attorney's office he had worked alongside for 11 years. He made a third call to a locksmith. I was home by 4 o'clock that afternoon. The apartment looked the same as I had left it 6 days earlier. Coffee cups still on the counter, a half-dead plant on the windowsill that Ryan had not watered. It looked like the apartment of 2 people who lived there together, which technically we still did. By 5 the locks had been changed. By 6, my father's attorney had drafted a letter to Ryan's phone and email informing him that, pursuant to the discovery of financial irregularities, his access to jointly held property was suspended pending legal review. By 8, my father's locksmith contact had also changed the code on the storage unit, which my father pointed out held, among other things, the boxes of my grandmother's china and my signed first edition book collection, neither of which had anything to do with Ryan, but both of which, my father said, he saw no reason to leave unprotected. Ryan called me at 8:47 that night. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 9:02. Voicemail. At 9:15, he sent a text that said, "Babe, what's going on? Someone changed the locks." Showed it to my father. He read it. He handed my phone back. "You don't need to respond tonight," he said. I didn't. Ryan arrived at the apartment the following evening. I knew he was coming. His flight had landed at 6 and he had sent 3 more messages between then and 7:30, each one escalating in a slightly different direction. The first was confused. The second was annoyed. The third said, "I don't know what you think is happening, but we need to talk." My father was there when he arrived. So was my father's attorney, Paul, who is a small man with wire-rimmed glasses and the particular stillness of someone who is very comfortable with silence. Ryan knocked, and I opened the door, and he looked at me and then looked past me at my father, and at Paul, and at the rolling legal bag Paul had brought, and something shifted in his face. "What is this?" Ryan said. It was not quite a question. My father said, "Why don't you come in?" Ryan came in. He sat down across from Paul. He was still in his travel clothes from Austin, a linen shirt, the watch. He looked at me and said, "Are you seriously doing this right now? You just got out of the hospital." "That's actually how this started," my father said mildly. Paul opened a folder and placed 3 documents on the coffee table. He watched Ryan through them the way I imagined he had walked hundreds of people through documents in his career, clearly, calmly, with no particular emotion. The savings account, the transfers, the dates, the amounts. Ryan's expression went through several things in quick succession. Surprise, which I suspected was not entirely genuine. Indignation, which I suspected was. And then something underneath both of those, something quieter and flatter, that I recognized as a man realizing that the version of events he had prepared was not going to be sufficient. "I was going to tell you," he said, to me, not to Paul. "The account thing was temporary. I had a business opportunity." "Which business?" my father said. Ryan looked at him. "What? Which business opportunity? You've been in consulting for 2 years. You have 1 client. Walk me through the business opportunity that required moving $60,000 out of a joint account without your wife's knowledge." Ryan was quiet. "The Charlotte Hotel," Paul said, sliding the second document forward. "Would you like to address that?" Ryan's jaw tightened. He looked at me again, and I looked back at him, and I thought about the 6 days in the hospital. I thought about the smoothie visits. I thought about take a rideshare. "It's 15 minutes. You'll be fine." I thought about a jewelry store and a necklace I had never seen and a bracelet I had never worn. I did not say anything. I did not need to. "There are 2 ways we can proceed," Paul said. He took off his glasses and cleaned them with the kind of unhurried deliberateness that I had come to understand was simply his way. "The first way involves a cooperative dissolution of the marriage, full financial disclosure and restitution of the funds moved from the joint account. Under this path, certain findings remain a private family matter." He replaced his glasses. "The second way involves my client's father, who spent 22 years as a federal prosecutor, sharing the financial documentation we have compiled with certain colleagues who remain active in that capacity. Transfers of the nature and pattern we have documented can carry significant federal implications. I trust you understand the distinction between the 2 paths." The apartment was very quiet. Ryan looked at the coffee table. He looked at the documents. He looked at my father, who was sitting in the armchair beside the window with his hands folded in his lap, looking back at him with the expression of a man who has already decided how this ends. "I want my own attorney," Ryan said finally. "Of course," Paul said. He closed the folder. I assumed you would. Please have them contact my office. We'll be in touch. Ryan left that night. He took a duffel bag from the closet and his laptop and the watch, and he left, and I stood in the apartment after the door closed, and my father put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Sit down. I'll make tea." He made tea. He sat with me for 2 hours. We talked about things that had nothing to do with Ryan, a book he had been reading, a trip my mother had been planning, a memory I had of a summer when I was 9, and we drove to Maine, and the car broke down in New Hampshire, and my father had somehow turned the breakdown into the best part of the trip. Before he left that night, he looked at me from the doorway and said, "I want you to know something." "What happened this week?" "Not the hospital, not the surgery, not even Ryan, but the part where you called me." "That was exactly right. That is always the right thing to do." I nodded. "And I want you to know," he continued, "that I have known for about a year that something was not right. I didn't say anything because it wasn't my marriage, but I want you to know I was watching, and the moment you called, I was ready." I thought about that for a long time after he was gone. The divorce took 7 months. Ryan's attorney, it turned out, did not have much to work with once the financial documentation was in Paul's hands. The restitution was agreed upon in the 3rd month, not the full amount, because some of it had moved somewhere that even Daniel's considerable skills could only partially trace. But enough. The jointly owned assets were divided. The life insurance policy was revised. Ryan did not go to federal prison, which my father said was a pragmatic outcome rather than a just one, though in his professional opinion the two were rarely the same thing. What I know now that I did not know 7 months ago is this: I had been making myself smaller for 2 years, smaller in the apartment, smaller in the finances, smaller in my own sense of what I was allowed to expect from another person. I had told myself that the things that bothered me were not important enough to bother anyone else with. I had looked at a credit card statement from Charlotte and filed it away under things I was not ready to see. I am 31 years old. I live in the same apartment which I own outright now, which is a sentence that still surprises me a little every time I say it. I have a windowsill plant that I water every Tuesday. I have a phone in my hand that, on the day I needed it most, I used to call the right person. My father called last Sunday the way he does every Sunday to talk about the book he's reading and whatever my mother has planned, and nothing in particular. Before he hung up, he said, "How are you really?" I told him I was good. Really good. He said, "Good," and I could hear in his voice that he meant it. Not relief exactly, but the particular satisfaction of a man who, when his daughter needed him, showed up 40 minutes early and brought Daniel. There are people in your life who, in the moment that matters, reveal exactly who they are. My husband revealed who he was on the day I was discharged from a hospital. My father revealed who he was 40 minutes later. I know which one I'm thinking about when I fall asleep at night. And it isn't Ryan.